Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 195 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The Second Minute podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me as always is my lovely hostess, Erin Paulette. How are you doing, Erin?
I loathe AT&T, and their customer service is non-existent. And despite having us been a customer for 10 years, that's going to end. No, I'm really not going to give any context. I've talked enough about it. Just on the really rare off chance that one of our listeners works for AT&T, your customer service is awful, and they should all die. And you should maybe find a new line of work.
Interestingly enough, for those who subscribe to the ACP blooper reel, you will hear Opal talking about his experience with AT&T's customer service. So, yeah, you are not alone, Erin, and I'm sorry you had to go through that, but it sounds like switching carriers is probably a pretty good idea. I know we dumped them, decades ago.
It's made complicated by the fact that we have 3 separate accounts with them. One is for the landline, which Mom refuses to give up. I mean, she's 82, so I think I don't need to explain anymore. One is for my dad's cell phone, so that he can call people while in the old folks' home. And then one is for our TV service, because we get, Direct TV. So, that's going to be fun.
I also have a landline because A, I carry a 1911, so therefore boomer life, and B, how else am I going to get the credit card scammers to go, wait, what?
Yeah. So I've wasted too much of my life in customer service hell dealing with phone banks and things like that. I'm ready to murder. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing better. My daughter again has fallen ill. The lovely world of we've isolated our kids from germs for 2 years. Now we're just going to open up the floodgates. My daughter is continuing her Pokemon adventure of catching all of the diseases with having caught a new one at the end of last week, which was exciting. She was pretty sick actually, but essentially the crux of it went to she was just really, really tired and not feeling well. And so she just kind of laid on the couch and napped and watched TV and that's it. And really didn't eat anything and probably didn't drink nearly enough either. And then suddenly when she came out, she was suddenly starving, and she was in that adorable little girl starving thing, which is, I am really hungry, which means I don't want any food. So I'm just going to be really mean to everybody. So that was fairly rodeo. And luckily that has come to an end, but yes, that was that. And, Erin,
I already hate it.
The podcast.
I don't even know what you're going to say, but that tone of voice, I already hate it.
No. The podcast bicycle rides again. I was on the Reload podcast with Stephen Dugutowski.
Okay.
Sean actually sent me a message this morning saying, I'm going to listen to the Reload podcast, and then, but I'll skip over the member interview, and went, oh wait, hey, I know this guy.
Is this the one that was the soundtrack to his near-miss accident?
No, that was a different one, though. Who knows? He'll probably he'll probably get into another accident or another near-miss.
Empirical evidence is starting to show that listening to you causes accidents.
Yes.
Or at least near-misses.
So, well, I got to say, Erin, I've... As every week goes, people will send me stories. I will see interesting Second Amendment stories, and I will just kind of sort of collect them. And if I find I've got a million browser tabs open, I will start creating our show notes, several days earlier.
Heck, I sent you one.
Yes, exactly. And I've realized that, oh my God, we have got a pile of Second Amendment news. And so, you know what? Actually, I think a good one to start on was that story you sent me first.
Okay. You didn't even have it in the main topic. I had to add it, and so I added it later, but okay, why not?
I thought I had it in there. I think it was, I might have had it a little out of order.
Nope.
Yeah, I did. You're right. I didn't put it in the main topic because of just how we discussed it. Neither here nor there. Aaron was frustrated with me then too.
So, on the very rare chance that he's listening to this, I'd like to thank Mr. Larry Keene of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, who sent me this link, because I tend to avoid, basically anything by Bloomberg and his anti-gun house organ, The Trace, mainly because, unlike Weer'd, I don't cultivate high blood pressure and outrage. But this was sent to me, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you, Mr. Keene. Because, well, do you perhaps remember, oh my gosh, I don't even remember if it was 2020 or 2021 or whatever, when The Trace actually decided that, hey, their readers were buying guns and they needed to write an article about, okay, you just panic bought a gun, here's what you need to know. Well, this is a continuation of that line of thought. And so this was the 25th of March in The Trace, part of their daily bulletin. And the headline is How Pandemic First-Time Gun Buyers Share Existing Owners' Views. And just that title, I'm sure, burns Bloomberg like sunlight burns a vampire. But it gets better, and it's only about a paragraph, but it's a long paragraph, and there's a beautiful, beautiful graph. And the short version here is that these first-time gun buyers, they're younger and more diverse than traditional gun owners, but that doesn't mean they're more receptive to gun reform. And in fact, this survey found that 86% of first-time buyers were under 45, 69% were people of color, and in all cases, and I'm quoting here, pandemic first-time buyers were as or more likely than pre-pandemic owners to support expanding concealed carry laws, allowing teachers to carry guns, shortening waiting periods before purchase, and allowing people to carry without a permit. Oh my God, this is just so delightful.
I mean, it is delightful. Number one, just the poor author and the copy editor who had to read it over and be like, yes, approve it. And just, I mean, I could just imagine like just tears of blood just dripping down their face. And, but also I'm just so pleased that all of these people that are going buying guns, number one, they are from previously underrepresented demographics within America. Is the, gone are the, older white men. And now, people of color, younger people, and all that. I would also assume probably more of a diversity of politics, which we will be getting into as we go on. And the fact that these people may be for, higher minimum wage. These people may be for, universal health care. They may be for all sorts of other causes that are traditionally pull against the groups that the NRA caters to. We'll just leave it at that. And yet these people are saying, no, we don't want more gun restrictions. We went to buy guns. We realized it was a pain in the butt. We expected it to be considerably less than that. Let's work to make it considerably less of a pain in the butt to buy a gun.
Yeah, specifically on that point, when I'm looking at the results here that were created by the University of Chicago Spotlight on Public Safety, the column titled Shortening Waiting Periods for People Who Want to Buy Guns Legally. So pre-pandemic gun owners were 49%. So 49% were in favor of shortening that. So it's pretty evenly split. Pandemic first-time gun buyers, 65% of them want to shorten that waiting period.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, first of all, odds are excellent that most of these new buyers were in gun-unfriendly states like New York and California. So, yeah, they're experiencing firsthand all of that governmental regulation, and they're realizing this is crap. And hopefully, this will continue to prove my political position that gun owners are gun voters. And it may take time, but I do think that this, combined with, like we mentioned a couple weeks ago, with constitutional permitless carry sweeping the nation, I think that this is going to be part of that tide. Mm-hmm. And, well, if California and New York are going to be one of the very, very last states that get constitutional carry, if ever, but they're not going to be unaffected. And I think this is going to be part of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're going to start with loosening up some of these very tight restrictions. And so, just first of all, this is overall wonderful, delightful news. And then the fact that it was printed in Bloomberg's anti-gun, I don't even know what to call it, a website, a web magazine. I call it an organ for pretty obvious reasons. And the fact that they printed it, and I knew that it hurt them to do it, is just the maraschino cherry on top.
Mm-hmm. And also, this is really one of my, like I said, we aim for ACP to be a political podcast, but a nonpartisan political podcast. We support the Second Amendment, and that's the important bit. And we may have different views on other political stuff, and we can debate other political stuff that's going on. But, let's all agree that while we may disagree on abortion, while we may disagree on gay marriage, while we may disagree on taxes, we all agree that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And it literally means exactly that. But I will often see like, oh, this is going through a Republican House, so this has a good chance of getting passed, or, oh, this is a majority Democrat state, so this may encounter some resistance on gun control. And it pains me to say that, because unfortunately, that is how the country is lined up right now. Is the Republicans are the pro-gun party, quotation marks. No, not all Republicans. And the Democrats are the anti-gun party. And again, no, not all Democrats. But I would love to see this be more of a nonpartisan issue. And it might be even more of a geographical way of they're a New York Republican, so they're really not that great on guns. But, this is an Oklahoma Democrat. Well, they're going to be really, they may be Democrats on some stuff, but they are very, very friendly to the Second Amendment. So we shall,
like 10, 20 years ago, there were such a thing. They were known as Blue Dog Democrats. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what happened to them. They disappeared.
Yeah, most recently, he was not a great guy. Just recently passed was Harry Reid. Harry Reid was, I don't even know if he was quite a Blue Dog Democrat, but because he was fairly liberal on most of his things, as far as I know. But he was absolutely a Second Amendment friendly senator. But I would like to use that as a transition. Is when we were talking about this, when you sent me this article, it really brought to mind the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it looks like she's going to be seated. I don't know quite this, but honestly speaking, I've been giving this a big leaving alone, because I've read over the transcripts of her hearing, and I've seen the various questions that were posed on the Second Amendment, and her answers were meh. They weren't stellar. She really didn't knock it out of the park, in my opinion, like some of the other justices have. But also at the same time, she didn't say anything that raised my hackles, and so I've honestly been content at giving her a good leaving alone as far as the Assorted Calibers podcast is concerned. And I mentioned this to you, and you went, aha, I have yet another article for you.
Yeah, I have less to say about this. So I received in the email a link from the Second Amendment Foundation, and the gun writer Lee Williams wrote an article titled, "Come on, man, of course Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is anti-gun." And I understand where he's coming from, and I respect Lee Williams as a person and as a journalist. I just feel like this is a reach. So during the hearings, and I have to agree with you, for the most part, the hearings, they didn't ask questions to get her answer. They asked questions to pose and virtue signal.
Mm-hmm.
And so during these hearings, Senator Grassley asked Judge Jackson, "Do you believe in the individual right to keep and bear arms? Is it a fundamental right?" And so Judge Jackson replied, "Senator, the Supreme Court has established that the individual right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right." And so Mr. Williams takes some issue with this because he thinks she should have said that the right to keep and bear arms was enshrined in the Constitution, or that it's a natural right. And instead she believes that the right is established by the Supreme Court, ergo granted by the government. And that is the position that most gun banners have. If it's a right that's granted by the government, then the government can take it away, and you don't have to worry about the Second Amendment. Again, I understand the thought process behind it. I don't know. I don't feel like that was what she said. So I'm going to very briefly drift into the next lane, but I'm not going to veer off into the weeds. So for the past week, we've all been inundated with, what's the definition of a woman? I don't know. I'm not a biologist. So here's my take on that situation, as I'm one of the people who's kind of affected by it. I believe that her response was basically a more polite version of the Mad Max Fury Road meme that's going around, where he looks at the woman and waves his finger and says, "That's bait." Mm-hmm. And honestly, I wish she had said that, because that would have made it a lot more clear what her position was. And she was basically saying, yeah, I'm not going to get sucked into that. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is that her answer to Senator Grassley is rather similar. It's just that, well, he asked her something that was a little more tangentially related to the law, and so she answered in a little more legalese. Honestly, compared to a lot of the other people that we've had nominated for the Supreme Court, I really haven't heard much about her to either really fire me up or make me despise her. She's just sort of middle of the road, and honestly, given the way things are these years, give me a nice mediocre candidate. That would be lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, she was nominated by Joe Biden, and I've quoted Joe Biden in my Weer'd audio fisks as an anti-gun politician. He's pretty unabashed by that. And she is endorsed by pretty much all of the anti-gun groups. And so there's that. So that's certainly enough to give you pause. But at the same time, she, again, has answered all these questions in what I would say is a satisfactory sense, at least concerning the Second Amendment. And one thing that was noted was that she was a public defender for a number of years. And furthermore, she is, as Joe Biden said in his selection process, an African-American woman. And let me tell you, you want to know somebody who may have been is of the demographic that gets screwed over the most by gun control. It is African Americans and women. And then furthermore, as a public defender, she has, if she may be elevated from that just because of her, where she is from and who she is growing up, she has certainly seen the people that were absolutely been railroaded by horrible and racist gun control laws. So there is certainly a chance that even if she is anti-gun right now and absolutely someone who thinks that the Heller decision was absolutely wrong or the McDonald decision was absolutely wrong and wants to see NYSERPA go down and New York be vindicated in their restrictions, there's always a chance that these things will change, especially as the sea change that we're seeing in that first article is happening.
You mentioned she was a public defender, and that was something I wanted to briefly bring up for exactly the reasons you mentioned. She may well have defended people who used a firearm to protect themselves, but she's the first SCOTUS appointee public defender that is in recent memory. I'm just curious if is she the first ever? I mean, you'd think surely not, but I haven't heard about that anywhere else. They're almost always pulled from prosecution. And so again, I'm wondering if that's just the difference between, prosecutors who seek to enforce the law and regulations and public defenders whose job is quite frankly to get people off from the law. That's all.
Yeah, no, she was born in DC. So that also means that she may have been defended somebody who really was just searched on a very, very spurious probable cause search, Terry stop type stop. And and you've got a gun on you because you're a DC teenager who lives in a very dangerous housing project and you don't have a criminal charge. You don't have a criminal background. You're not necessarily a bad person, but you are carrying a weapon and that is illegal. And I mean, in DC, it's any weapon really. I mean, you can go to prison for a pocket knife there.
Well, actually, I was going to say, I don't remember if this was D.C. or if this was another place, but there was one that was so very anti-gun that you could receive a gun charge for having ammunition. If you just had like a loose .22 cartridge in the trunk of your car, you were arrested on a firearm charge.
I mean, that's Massachusetts. You need a firearms permit to own ammunition or ammunition components. So that is a common thing that is suggested amongst people that take new shooters to the range is if you are shooting with someone who does not have a permit, you have them check the treads of their shoes before you leave the range, because if they stepped on a .22 shell and that decides to pop itself loose on the floorboard of their car, that could be a problem moving forward.
Oh dear. Yeah. And a quick Googling. Yes, she is the first justice with experience as a public defender.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's you're 100% correct. It's absolutely the first time I've ever heard anyone say public defender, but also at the same time, I'm not a super SCOTUS nerd, so I haven't. I don't know the background of Oliver Wendell Holmes or any of those past justices. So. Yeah, so. I mean, you know what? I wish her well. It looks like she's gonna go through, and that's just how it is. I just urge people to be cautious on just painting someone as anti-gun, especially painting someone anti-gun simply because they are a Democrat or are nominated by a Democrat. That's just not fair, and that's not going to win us any allies moving forward, especially given the news of all of these new gun buyers and the fact that these people may be coming from left-wing backgrounds and they may be retaining a lot of their left-wing ideology, but they are not retaining the more traditional left-wing ideology of disarmament. So I'm moving on to the next story. This one, I don't really have a ton to say about it. It's only just because it's interesting, and I just thought I would give it a mention. But the Denver DA has dropped the murder charge against the security guard defending a camera crew at a protest. And yeah, this was one of those really iffy shoots. Essentially, this guy was working as private security for a camera crew. A protester came up to him. He closed the distance and tried to keep the person away. The guy slapped him in the face. The guy, once he was assaulted, drew his firearm, and at the same time, the guy was raising a can of bear spray and was spraying it at the time that he was shot and killed. And he was charged with murder and has been for the last 2 years now. But he has been released on that charge. And like I said, I don't have a ton to say about that, only because it was one of those, it's a very questionable shoot. I could really go both ways on that one, especially when I looked around. I couldn't exactly find all the video footage of it. There was raw video when this first came through. I mean, it's really more of one of those, there's a time to turn the other cheek, because just like we talked about with the quote unquote popcorn shooter, of course, there's, no popcorn involved. But in that movie theater shooting, just because you're justified doesn't mean that it's a good idea to do so. And this really seems like one of those instances, because a man is dead, and this guy has spent over a year and a half in jail, or I don't know. I actually don't know if he was in jail, but awaiting this trial that never came.
Yeah, see, this is where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I do feel like it was justified, although I do agree how it was iffy. I remember the video, and things happened simultaneously, or at least seemingly. Things had to be slowed down a lot. And the fact that he was serving in the capacity as security or a bodyguard and was operating without a license in the state also made things legally murky. Mm-hmm. But from my perspective, he was tasked with defending the camera crew, and we can debate about whether or not it was legal for him to be serving in that capacity. I'm speaking mainly from like a moral point of view here. Mm-hmm. So he was tasked to protect these people, and you have a large and aggressive man who came forward, and so the security guard did his job and intervened. The large man stated that he was going to, I don't remember what was said, the expletive deleted you up. I mean, I assume it's the F word, but he made verbal threats, indicative of violence, and then followed those up with assault upon the security guard. That does indicate that there is both ability and desire to do some harm. Mm-hmm. Now, just pulling the gun in that regard, iffy. But the fact that the aggressive man was pulling out bear spray to use, it seems to me that in that instance, it was justified. Now, maybe he was pulling it out just because he got slapped. Yeah, again, we could argue the fine points on this. I'm going to go with, I see your point, but I'm about 60% that this was a good shoot.
Yeah, and certainly the fact that he had shown physical violence and then the bear spray was coming up. Again, you don't want to be blinded by the bear spray when somebody has already shown themselves to be a violent threat. I mean, mm-hmm. The slap certainly does elevate the bear spray as well. I mean, it's... Mm-hmm. I wish it was more cut and dry. There's certainly some nuance to it, but you raised some great points, Aaron.
Thank you.
So let's dive into some good news, Aaron. This one comes out of the state of Florida. Have you been following this story?
Not really. I've been avoiding a lot of things. It seems like the really relevant news seeks me out, and so I haven't heard anything about this. But apparently, our governor, DeSantis, is he is feuding with members of his own party by vetoing some redistricting something. I don't know. Someone's going to mention gerrymandering. And I believe this has something to do with constitutional carry, because he's mentioned he wants to sign it. And as I've ranted multiple times before, the GOP in my state is not going to let that happen for quite a long time. I hope you know more about this, because I know very little.
Well, yeah, that is the talk, and I don't know who has the more chips in play, but essentially, yeah, they've got this redistricting map that they had proposed. He's vetoed it, so therefore he's called in a special session, because essentially the session was over, the legislative session was over, and so therefore he's calling them back to fix the map. And he says while they're there, he wants there to be constitutional carry also presented. We'll see if he can make that happen, but just the fact that he is making this happen, I will just compare this to President Trump and to President Biden, in the fact that an executive really can't make laws. They can do their executive orders, and they're awful. I'm as a general rule not a fan of executive orders, and I think they're horribly abused. But one thing an executive can absolutely do is calls to arms and making requests, and even they can draft a bill and then present it to either a senator or a House member to present to the floor. And DeSantis is doing what neither Trump nor Biden has been doing, which is Trump campaigned as a pro-gun president, and honestly speaking, whenever he spoke about guns, he was talking about gun control, and all we had was this ATF led bump stock ban that went through. Biden is very similarly always talking about anti-gun things, but yet he has not really called for any specific laws to be pushed forward by the House and Senate. It's really more just platitude, really red meat to the masses. And so this, plus the fact that DeSantis is he up for re-election? Do you know off the top of your head, Aaron?
No, I don't
think
know.
In November, but possibly next year. It would be next year.
It wouldn't be next year. It would be 24.
Yeah.
So I wasn't entirely sure, but I checked, and special thanks to ballotpedia.org. Florida elects governors in the midterm elections. And so DeSantis was elected in 2018, and yes, he is up for re-election this fall.
All right. Well, so I could see this as definitely him posturing as a means to fortify his position as a pro Second Amendment candidate. And also, again, referencing back to that Bloomberg article, there are a lot more people that might be more interested in Second Amendment Second Amendment law as far as candidates go. And so this may be just posturing, but at the same time, he is certainly taking a position of leadership towards constitutional carry. So it can't hurt.
All right. So speaking of constitutional carry and potentially even political posturing, do we have any word on when the Georgia governor is going to sign their bill into law?
I don't have a word on an exact date, but it may actually be signed into law by the time the listeners are listening to this, because we were a bit confused a few shows ago, because it had passed both the House and the Senate, and so I assumed it was going to the desk. But unfortunately, those were two separate laws. And so now the reconciled law has been passed, and so it should be heading to the governor's desk soon. And he only, I believe, has 6 days to sign it once it goes on, and it passed with enough votes that he doesn't have to sign it if he doesn't want to. And so,
yeah, but why wouldn't he want to? He said that he wants to.
Exactly, he would not let that go to waste. So Georgia is going to be very likely constitutional carry very, very, very soon. I don't see how they won't be. And so, yeah, that's, 25. And I mean, there's so many states right now that are going over constitutional carry bills that who knows, it could be 26 like any second now. Like there could be just someone that's just like, oh yeah, no, we were doing this all along and you missed it. So yeah, we're crossing the 50% line, which is absolutely amazing.
So that's the good news. Now we've got mostly bad news. I say mostly because, well, I'm going to go a little bit off script and rearrange things here. So Weer'd, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, is ending. They're ending operations. Yay! But it sounds like they're being bought out by Bloomberg. Am I right?
On paper, you are 100% right. I deeply suspect that CSGV may have been bought out by Bloomberg a long time ago. Of course, there is that great bonus podcast that you had me make, which was I call the Bloomberg Conspiracy, where I've been pointing out that gun control groups have suddenly been really working completely in lockstep with every town, and I'm seeing it as Bloomberg was diversifying by grabbing gun companies or lobbying groups that existed before he stepped foot into politics as a way to distance. Because we started off pointing out the fact that Bloomberg's mouthpiece, The Trace, because it was created by Michael Bloomberg. He put the money down. He started it. He claims that he doesn't have control over it, but in the end, he's the guy writing the checks. So how much do you want to believe in that? And he knows that he can't ever get out from under that. Moms demand action. Oh, Shannon Watts was a stay-at-home mom and formed this grassroots Facebook group that was seen by Michael Bloomberg, and he was really just elevating their message, but he's writing all the checks, and Shannon Watts was never a stay-at-home mom, and all that stuff's all a lie anyway. So no, there's only so far you can get that. So the idea that you could buy really for relative cheap a lot of these anti-gun groups by just simply paying their overhead costs, since a lot of them, whatever finances we can find, is usually pretty dismal. So I suspect that Bloomberg may have been writing some checks and therefore had the ears of these groups to begin with. But it appears so CSGV, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, many of the people, especially from the Golden Age of blogs, will know them because they were one of the more particularly rabid groups. I will know the fact that they have actually attempted some slander attacks on me personally, so I don't like them on a personal level, and I will be very open and full disclosure on that. They've also done some pretty nasty attacks on friends of mine and friends of ours and other fellow activists. And I know one of the most egregious ones was Lad Everett, who was director of operations. I can't remember what he was. He's no longer with the group. But he tweeted out what he thought was George Zimmerman's home address in the pre-trial period for the shooting of Trayvon Martin. And why would you do that? What good could that possibly do? So yeah, they are we're a particularly nasty group, and they are ceasing operations, and what they're being bundled into is into the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School for Public Health.
I'm sorry, whose school?
The Bloomberg School. Right.
So the same Michael Bloomberg who owns The Trace and Moms Demand Action and all those other things. So he literally is buying CGSV.
Yes. Yep. And so he has rolled them in, and so several of the main operating groups, Josh Horowitz, the quote unquote Oompa Loompa of gun control, thank you, Sean Sorrentino, is the co-director, along with Daniel Webster, who has been the anti-gun anti-gun person for the Bloomberg School of Public Health leader up until now. And let's see, who are some of the other people? A few of these people I don't know. I know that, what is her name? Lori Haas is also been rolled into this group. And what I'm seeing this is a lot of this group, obviously existed before, before it may not have been this specific name, but of course Johns Hopkins and the Bloomberg School has been producing anti-gun research pieces for a while, and been giving anti-gun speeches and teaching anti-gun classes and things like that for a while. But it's been almost always essentially, medical related people who are, either epidemiologists, doctors, master of public health, that sort of stuff, have been at the forefront of that. And they haven't had the boots on the ground activists that CSGV has. And so you'll see now suddenly there's a whole lot of JDs and various people on that are more for the legal side of it. And I think what Bloomberg is trying to do is he's taking his little, essentially, lobbying group from Johns Hopkins and weaponizing them as an anti-gun lobbying group. So we will see where that goes. But CSGV is dead, and Michael Bloomberg has bought the corpse. So speaking of the banality of anti-gun groups, I'm not going to go too deep into this just because I don't understand the laws. And again, it's foreign countries. That's really the takeaway. But actually, a listener of ours in Australia sent me this this article. But Western Australia is setting to reform their gun control laws, and it sounds like they're increasing some of the requirements to get a gun license and making it easier for police to strip licenses from people. And apologies to people from Australia, but like I said, I'm not super read up on the gun control laws from Australia. But either way, Australia in the 90s passed some of the most sweeping gun control laws out there. They banned pretty much anything useful, and it didn't do anything towards the violent crime rates. It didn't do anything towards the suicide rates. And like all gun control groups, the anti-gunners over there are not happy, and they want more. And so this is just another line on the don't ever give into gun control. Not only is it not going to give you any of the safety or any of the benefits that they claim that it's going to, but they are also not going to be happy, and they are not going to ever stop. You may give them some of the rights that you think that you may not be using, like bump stocks. We had our bump stock ban. Oh, it's bump stocks. Who uses them? They're silly range toys. Yes, but they will keep coming back for more. It's not like they're just going to be happy.
So in the show notes, this is listed as WA's gun laws, and of course WA for Western Australia. But WA is also the abbreviation for Washington State. And I know that Washington State has had some pretty bad laws as well. We may have mentioned that last week, I don't recall.
Yep.
But how they've had a magazine ban go into effect. And so for a moment, as I'm clicking on the link, I literally went, oh my God, what did Washington do this time? Yeah, I know it really doesn't add anything to the discussion, but I found it somewhat amusing, and it's kind of karmic how both of these have the same initial, and they're both horribly anti-gun.
Yep.
It is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you mentioned bump stocks, and it's pretty easy to see the progression from bump stock to forced reset trigger, like we talked about last week, and there's going to be more about that later on in the show. But the ATF has done something that I don't entirely hate, Weer'd, and I'm not sure how I feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can tell me whether this is good or not. but the ATF has revoked the license of the gun maker tied to Jimenez Arms, which is one of those... I think calling them of dubious quality is actually giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Jimenez is one of the Ring of Fire guns. So, I mean, you've got, off the top of my head, Jimenez, Bryco, Jennings, Phoenix, Raven. I think those are the big ones of all of these. They're pot metal guns. They are definitely a step below a high point in overall quality. Yeah, I'm a proud owner of a Jennings JA-22, and it is awful. But Mara Healy says I can't have one, so guess what I got? But yes, so they Jimenez initiated bankruptcy proceedings as they were under scrutiny for ties to interstate trafficking. I have no idea the validity of these claims and all of that, but like I said, these lawsuits are unbelievably expensive when they get leveled. So it could be. I mean, these guys make very, very, very inexpensive guns, and so therefore it's got to be a volume business. So I've got to imagine their margins are probably paper thin. So it could be they filed for bankruptcy because they had dead to rights over this, or they filed for bankruptcy just because there was no way they were going to survive fighting this lawsuit. But they filed for bankruptcy. They liquidated their assets. I believe Everytown bought all their assets and had them destroyed. So any completed guns that were still in their possession and parts have been destroyed. And then they reformed under a new license called JA Industries, and the ATF has essentially revoked this license for the time being.
But you still haven't told me how I should feel about this.
I mean, honestly speaking, I'm also not exactly sure. Overall, I kind of don't like the idea of the ATF doing this because, I mean, on one hand, what they are doing is they're playing a shell game. Is they're filing for bankruptcy under one name and then changing another one. And of course, I mean, Jimenez was an offshoot of Raven and Jennings, and I think it was just a few minutes ago before we started the show, and those listen to the ACP blooper reel will hear this discussion. Oddball likes to send me absolutely awful guns, and he sent me it's a Bryco Arms Jennings 9. So it says Bryco on one side and it says Jennings on the other, which tells me that it was probably the gun was probably made when Jennings still existed, and then it was transferred over to Bryco for it to be completed or for it to be sold. So yeah, these companies have definitely been doing shell games against lawsuits for a while. And so on one hand, the ATF is absolutely stopping a shell game. On the other hand, I'm concerned that they are really overstepping their boundaries and playing favorites. We could leave that up for user interaction.
Leave a comment below.
Yes. But either way, I think we've gone on with enough news. I think we've covered all the stories. So shall we take it on away to the segments?
Sure. So as I just stated, last week we noted that the ATF had declared that forced reset triggers are machine guns. But just what is a forced reset trigger? David is here to explain how they work.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. Since it's regularly been in the news, and especially considering recent ATF actions against forced reset triggers, in this segment I want to discuss what makes a semi-automatic firearm not function in fully automatic mode. In a word, it's all about the disconnector. When the trigger of a semi-automatic firearm is pulled, it releases the hammer or striker through an interface between those parts called the sear. The firearm operates so quickly that when it finishes cycling after firing, the trigger is still being held back. Yet, in a properly operating semi-automatic, it doesn't fire again. This is because when the action cycles and the bolt or slide reciprocates, the hammer or striker is prevented from going forward by the disconnector. Every semi-automatic firearm mechanism has a part or parts that perform this function, though they may be called by different names. For simplicity's sake, I'll stick with disconnector. For example, in an AR-style rifle, the disconnector sits on the rear of the trigger bar and catches the auxiliary sear on the back of the hammer as the bolt reciprocates after firing. It then holds the hammer until the trigger is released. At that time, the hammer is passed from the disconnector back to the trigger bar sear and is ready to fire again. In a 1911 style pistol, when the slide is fully forward, the disconnector protrudes from the top of the frame into a small recess in the bottom of the slide. Until the trigger is released after firing, the disconnector prevents the trigger from interacting with the fire control parts. In this design, the disconnector also acts as an out-of-battery safety. In a Glock pistol, as the slide moves rearward, it pushes the disconnector out of the way of the trigger bar, allowing the trigger bar to move back up into place without the trigger needing to be released. With the trigger bar in the upper position, it catches the striker hook as the slide returns forward. When the trigger is released, the disconnector moves out of the way and enables the trigger bar to move down when the trigger is pulled again. The action of the disconnector is easy to demonstrate with an unloaded firearm. After making sure the firearm is in fact unloaded, point it in a safe direction, disengage any manual safeties, and pull the trigger. The firing mechanism should audibly release. Keep the trigger held back and manually cycle the action. Then slowly ease the trigger forward. As the trigger returns to its rest position, there should be another audible and tactile click. This sound is called the reset and means the disconnector has completed its operation and the gun is now ready to fire again. Removing the disconnector will generally not cause a firearm to operate fully automatically. Instead, it will likely become a manually operated gun and require cycling the action after releasing the trigger for each shot and ejecting every other round. This is because without the disconnector in place, the hammer or striker will follow the slide or bolt forward, but generally without sufficient force to detonate the primer of a chambered cartridge. Moving on to current events. While I haven't examined a forced reset trigger in person, I am somewhat familiar with the mechanical theory. Basically, the gun operates normally up to the moment of firing. As the bolt carrier moves back, it activates a lever that forces the trigger forward against the shooter's finger. Once the bolt is back in full lockup, continued pressure against the trigger causes it to release again. Once the bolt is back in full lockup, continued pressure against the trigger causes it to release again, firing the next round. The cycle then repeats with the trigger moving back and forth for each shot. Therefore, technically, and according to current law, these mechanisms are clearly not fully automatic. However, the ATF has rarely allowed either consideration to prevent them from making whatever ruling they desire. During the lead-up to this segment, I received an email from the ATF in which they quote both the NFA and the GCA machine gun definition. The letter states, machine gun is defined under 26 U.S.C. section 5845B and 18 U.S.C. 921A23 as any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. That is the key element, by a single function of the trigger. The term shall also include the frame or receiver of any such weapon, any part designed and intended solely and exclusively, or combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, and any combination of parts from which a machine gun can be assembled if such parts are in the possession or under the control of a person. The letter went on to say, ATF's examination found that some FRT devices allow a firearm to automatically expel more than one shot with a single continuous pull of the trigger. The definition does not mention anything about single continuous pull of the trigger. It specifically says by a single function of the trigger. But the letter states, for this reason, ATF has concluded that FRTs that function in this way are a combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, and hence ATF has classified these devices as a machine gun as defined by the NFA and the GCA. As others have pointed out, the operation of this mechanism may be more challenging to explain to laypeople and easier to equate with actual full auto operation. Based on that consideration, the future doesn't look good for this concept. All honor to Rare Breed Trigger for getting this fight started, and for all our sakes, may they be victorious.
What do you use, weapons-wise?
My favorite old 1911.
45. Old gun.
Served my country well. Long time.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I get them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
I mean, I gotta say, if we can't just abolish the ATF, then the Supreme Court or maybe Congress needs to rein them in, because I'm just seeing this as getting just so out of control.
Chevron deference.
Yeah. Chevron deference is just evil. And then furthermore, all of this that we're talking about is the technique known as bump firing. And I say technique because I have bump fired an AR-15. And I have bump fired an AR-15 long before any of these widgets and gadgets went through. I did it once. I went, okay, that's how you do it. That's really stupid and that's a waste of money, and didn't do it ever again. And then saw people coming up with bump stocks and binary triggers, and well, the binary triggers are actually something different. But these, this force reset trigger, it's essentially just a mechanical advantage to the technique of bump firing. And it's a technique. If the gun is semi-auto and doesn't have an absolutely horrendous trigger, I tried to do it with an SKS, and that was a bridge too far. Yeah. But if you've got a gun that has a reasonable trigger on it, you can bump fire it. And I've seen people do it. I did it from the hip, but which is considerably easier to learn how to do. But I've seen people who have learned to bump fire from the shoulder, so you can actually bump fire while making a sight picture. And so this is just a technique that exists no matter what they do to ban the technology that helps that. And that just further makes this so stupid. And hopefully they will win in the upcoming lawsuits.
Well, as we mentioned last week, they were prepared for this and seemed to be actively courting it. Mm-hmm. So really the real question is, can they prevail against the government? And I don't know, because the government has way more resources that can be thrown at this. But if anyone can, I would say that it's Rare Breed, because they came into this with a game plan. And so I wish them the very best of luck in this regard. I would actually even argue that this force reset trigger was a cool product for the civilian AR-15 market second. And the first one is, come on, guys, try and ban it. So moving... That's bait.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just referencing Mad Max again. That's bait.
That's bait. So moving on, in his last segment, Xander inspired a conversation about how Americans are becoming more and more specialized in their skills. Xander expands on that with his independent thoughts on continuing education.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. Lately I've been reading a book called Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David J. Epstein. I'm only about halfway through, but it feels like the start of the book more or less described me, due to my wide range of skills and knowledge. A lot of my skills comes from having grown up on a dairy farm, and that means I can do a variety of basic tasks like maintenance on vehicles, operate any heavy equipment, plumbing, really basic wiring, things like that. And in addition to that, I have taken to reading quite a few different books, nonfiction, to expand my knowledge. I've picked up machining as a hobby just because it interested me, read a few books on it. I read books on leadership, on various technologies, science, math, basically increasing my knowledge base. The more I stretch my brain, the more I can keep doing it. As long as you keep educating yourself, you can keep learning. To stop learning really is to begin the long, slow decline into fading away, passing away. Doing nothing with your brain is just like doing nothing with your muscles. It atrophies. And so it's always useful when a situation comes up to be able to either know how to do something or be able to look up how to do something, or even just being able to tell if somebody else is accomplishing a task within the ballpark of cost-effective and well. This also applies to firearms advocacy. For the people we're trying to convince, not the specific anti-gunners, but the average person who is watching us argue with anti-gunners, the whole shall not be infringed becomes a wordless screech to those average folks. Having a wider range of knowledge and experiences lets you explain concepts to them using more words than that. To be able to say, okay, this is just like a tool. We use, say, ram sets to drive nails into concrete. We have such a wide variety of options available, whereas just rather than a toddler-esque cry of, I want it, I want it, I want it. And we want to present ourselves as mature, capable adults rather than children who want a dangerous toy. Yes, I know, Oddball and his Altor. Still, I've got nothing. Still, we want to present as the mature individuals that the police associations and similar present themselves as, or try to. We want to show that, yes, we are just like, in fact, we are just like the average person because we are the average people. And not being able to connect to someone with a knowledge or experiences that are tangential to their walks of life means that being able to connect to them, it's not them and us, it is all us. By enjoying, the philosophical equivalent of sitting down with a good friend and having a beer and being able to talk about favorite sports teams, that there's that level of human connection that brings everybody closer together. Prime example, Operation Blazing Sword brings folks from the queer community together with folks from the firearms community, and we're all human. We all have the right to self-defense. Again, as I've stated before, rights by governments are not granted, they are merely recognized. And by recognizing each other, maybe we can get rights recognized better. Have fun, be safe. I hope I gave you something to think about.
I gotta say, one thing that makes me turn into old man Weer'd, shaking my fists about the kids today, is we have so much information available to us. Everybody's got a smartphone now. Everyone's hooked up to the internet all the time, unless you're out in the middle of the woods. And yet, so many people are just so reluctant to even scratch the surface. I mean, we've got that service. Let me Google that for you. I think we've all seen this website, where you can just send somebody a link and it'll just show the cursor typing in the very question that they asked. And oh my goodness, the first 3 hits on Google are the answer to the question that you are asking. So maybe you could have just Googled it yourself instead of asking somebody else. it just bothers me on just this level of intellectual laziness. I mean, your mind is a muscle, and if you don't use it, it's going to atrophy. Just as a weekly tie-in, my daughter has been snacking on water crackers. She requested, "Daddy, get more water crackers from the store." And
what are water crackers?
They're just the very, very simple, thin, crispy crackers that you might see on like a charcuterie board.
Okay.
And
I've never heard the term.
Yeah, they're not like, thick and buttery like a Ritz cracker or all of that. They're just very, very simple. They're quite good with cheese. So she requested them, and these are very, very simple crackers. And the one brand that was at my store was like $4 for a box. And I'm like, what is in these things? And so I looked it up, and like when I looked up the recipe, I didn't even just look up one. I think I read 3 recipes and watched like 3 YouTube videos of people making water crackers. And then like I mixed and matched all the easiest stuff from all of those and came up with a recipe. And my daughter and I made water crackers this weekend, and they turned out really, really good. And they're super duper easy to make and super duper inexpensive to make. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing from now on when we want more crackers.
I would expect nothing less from the man who also bakes his own bread.
That's true. So it's one of those, like, I just went out and just did some research, and it was all just like right there on the internet. It was just as simple as typing in water cracker recipe into a search engine. And that's all you need to do. And yet people just don't do this. And why would you do that? And this not only goes to the DIY step, but like just having a basic knowledge of stuff can help you. Like, say your mechanic says, "Hey, this part in your car is broken." Well, do you know that even if that part exists in your car? I have heard like all sorts of stories on unscrupulous mechanics, like saying, "Oh, we got to fix a whole bunch of stuff in your car," and it wasn't necessary. Or your car might even have that part. And so just having a basic understanding of how, say, a car works or how your body works if you're going to go see your doctor can help you be better armed moving forward. You don't even have to be the expert. You can just know some more questions to ask.
So this is kind of related to your water biscuit story. I'm not the knife aficionado that Oddball is, but I like knives and I like them sharp. And I have some which have given me problems over the years. And eventually I just gave in and I used some birthday money. And I bought the Work Sharp Ken Onion edition. I don't quite remember the name for it, but it was basically, it's a belt sander designed for knives. Mm-hmm. And belt sanders require some skill, and it's really, really easy to mess up a knife that way. And I just decided, you know what, I am so tired of not being able to get these knives sharp that I am going to spend the money and I'm going to spend the time and I'm going to learn how to sharpen. These knives are either going to be sharp or they're going to be dead, but it's going to be one of the two, and by God, it's going to be by my hand. And I'm still figuring out some of the finer points, especially with sharpening my machetes, but I'm getting there, and I'm putting in the time and the effort, and I'm getting a lot better at it. Now, you know, it's not like I'm going to be able to do this professionally, and Lord knows this is dependent upon electricity. So if this goes out, you know, it's not like I can provide a service to the local community by sharpening knives because I need power. But it's still a good skill to have. And I figure if I learn how to sharpen these things on a powered belt, maybe I can transfer this to other things. So it's not quite the success story that your water biscuits are, but the knives that I wasn't happy with, hey, they're sharp now. Mm-hmm. Some of them are a little uglier than others, but I knew that going in, and they work.
And by the way, Aaron, let me just say, you may not be the knife expert that Oddball is. Don't worry, dear. None of us are. Well, I think on that note, I would like to thank our listeners. Thank you so much for listening to our show. And also, I would like to thank our supporters on Patreon. And if you're not a supporter on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast and sign up to get cool things like bonus content. Like we've got early release of the podcast. We've got our blooper reels. And we have the ACP film tracks, and we also have our bonus show, which is the ACP Magnum.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com, and you can also hear me on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
You can find me in all the regular places, blah, 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 blah. So it's the Work Sharp Knife and Tool Sharpener Ken Onion Edition, and it's just a little mini belt sander. This is just for the people who listen in. And then if you want to spend more money, because of course you do, you can get the blade grinder attachment. And that's because the other one is just mostly for knives, but this other one is like, well, now you can do axes and hatches and, you know, you're like my long-ass kukri machete. And I'm going to include links to that in the show notes. And these things don't mess around. A good chunk of my time is like, oops, let me see if I can fix that. But, you know, it's the spirit of learning, and that's what blue-collar prepping is all about. It's bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com is one of the many places you can find me. Are you bored yet? I'm bored of talking.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I'm not even going to try. He makes watercrackers. I sharpen blades. Our prepper skills are assorted, and so is our podcast. Why are you even here? Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right, it's rum o'clock.